This meeting is being recorded.
Oh. Did you hear that? It's a voice saying we're being recorded. Right. So there's been some interesting concerns and comments about how we collaborate.
Yes, I gotta leave now.
Yes, and as we've said before, people want to save the world. It's like herding cats. You know, we're going to go all over the place. So it is really important that we clarify what we're willing to offer, what we can offer, and what we're trying to do. So Gunther, you were commenting on that, and I would love to hear more.
Yes. So, yeah, so I was saying that it's lots of ideas, developments, and so yeah, people basically are trying to best to push their ideas forward, and yeah, I wanted to say that I mean I really have great admiration for Doug Engelbart's vision, and it's really super important to think about how we can use technology to improve our lives. However, I mean, regarding our discussions and openness and collaboration, I think there is one underestimated constraint, and that's not everything can be efficiently or effectively communicated through various media like Zoom. So what I mean is that there is a physical distance, so we don't share an office, we don't have a common workplace. So it's not that, let's say I do some experiments and I scribble something on my whiteboard. Now, if we were all in the same building, of course, oh, hey, here I have this great idea. It's not ready for presentation, but let's just have a quick discussion. And it's simply not possible. And even if you think about, because one remark was that how the ARPA did research, or how Xerox did research, and they set up this decentralized research community, which is all very well and fine. But let's not forget, they had, first of all, they had loads of money. The research situation was different, so there was more liberty in research, but things were not as great, of course, and I can't really comment on it because since I wasn't around at the time. But anyway, they all they at least they worked in a common place, so, and they could meet each other. And I know at Xerox there is beanbag sessions, and we don't have beanbag sessions, and this is really, I think, where important conversations happen. And I think that's one very, very tough constraint that we are facing. And so I think this is just something to keep in mind. And yeah, for collaboration, I mean, there are so many aspects. So one, I think, angle that we could explore is that Mark told us, showed us, was it on Friday, his Tinderbox, and I think incredible amount of work that you put into it, Mark. And I think if we can focus, for example, on that data set and try out different kinds of visualizations and how we navigate essentially through what you have carefully curated, I think this could be a start. And as Frode already mentioned, Adam is working on a spatial hypertext system, and yeah, essentially what the question is then, what can be done to support that kind of research? And then of course the next question would be, what are the technological options and what's technologically viable? And of course another problem is that with all the people following different directions, I think that's not really a problem, because our time is limited, and we need people exploring or re-exploring, for instance, semantic networks. And you told us a lot about trail marks, and yeah, I think it's important to have that kind of diversity. But yeah, of course, integration is, yeah, it is very tough, and sometimes the directions are changing. It's good to keep the conversation alive, and it's not easy what we are doing, and figuring out let's say the difference that makes a difference. Oh, that's very important. That's why we are having after all these meetings, and uh, I know it can be frustrating, and as everybody knows, I'd like to have my own NLS, and I wanted to have it, I don't know, 10 years ago, but it's not that easy because there are so many technical angles to it. And I think also is that I think you mentioned this in your Blue Sky paper for the difference is that of course in the early days, yeah, sure, programming was tough and resources were constrained, but it was also an advantage because you could have various greenfield projects. But now the demands are different. They are higher, and they are not exactly easy to pinpoint. And so these are just some issues. But yeah.
Mark, I saw you had your hand up, but just really briefly before that. One thing is a small issue that becomes a big issue. So you saw, maybe I sent an email about the student competition, right? So the question is, I have to decide now just for myself. I have the future of text publishing. I have these different domains, how to organize that. The reason I bring it up now is one of those was created in Adobe Muse. Adobe Muse said it was launching for the last time on my laptop, and then it crashed. So I have no access to the source HTML for that. It's completely obscene, right? So my other sites, I have one on Squarespace, which will last as long as I pay for it. I have one on WordPress, which has its own issues. So that's why the whole, let's just build a thing on the web and we can all use it. We can all use it until that server goes down. So that's a big thing. So when we're talking about collaborating, we're not just talking about building it in an NLS Doug style. We are, of course, talking about building an NLS as Doug would want if he was working now, which would have to be a very different beast. So there are huge complications, and I don't think that we have the funding or interest, to the six of us or whoever, to build one single thing. We have to build components that interoperate, right? Anyway, just wanted to get that in there, Mark.
I was going to just I was just going to sort of actually cross-thread we had a really interesting our sort of lab group this morning, which Fred and I both part of, had a really interesting conversation, and a couple of things I think pertinent that came up, and also pertinent to this question about collaboration and you know what we're doing, is that one of the things is that you know, and as Gunther's related to, you know, doing research costs money, and it's no easier on the outside. I've walked away from the smoking ruins of a startup. So yeah, you know, and so nothing's a given. But at the same time, it's no reason to not try. And so one of the things that we should be looking at is the pragmatism. And so this is some of the stuff that's gone into sort of Fred's work, is that, and indeed, to be fair, you know, to give due credit, Chris Gutteridge, who I think was, you know, one of the sort of had the seed-corn idea of the visual meta that's been much polished since, is that, well, let as well as going to the sunny uplands in the distance, let's try and fix some of the things we can fix, and a lot of it actually, I think my life experience has taught me, it's about working sort of around the edges of things. In other words, if you ask people, they'll just say no. So the thing is to be open-minded, to think of others, and to work with good intent. And then you introduce things, and it's too late by that point for them to say no. So it's a real duty of care to not just build another silo or something. But I do think, you know, with a wide enough group, and if you embrace the concept of a diverse view, then I think you can create useful things, and you can put them out there, and good things will take flight. And so I just offer that as a slight bulwark to the thing of saying, well, you know, it's not this or it's not that. The truth is, you know, you can always make things better, but they normally end up as an Ian Banks novel or something, and we're not there yet. So, doing things we can do, I think are quite important. And another interesting thing that came out of this morning's conversation was this idea of sort of faceted browsing. And this again goes back to slightly to visual meta, and we were talking about visual meta, and we talked about the way in which you could have what amounts to being a virtual binder for a set of documents. And this is, in a sense, something that PDF has embraced, unused by most people, but embraced, gosh, since the 90s, where you can have an index to documents that aren't in the file you're in, and you can link out to. Think about how we can use that to provide better means to share annotations, and in a sense, increase sharing of trails through the data. Anyway, a few things to just stones to throw in the pond there. And Raphael, I haven't forgotten. I owe you some data. I've just been up to here with a conference deadline.
It's quite all right, Mark.
The thing you just mentioned there, Mark, was also, of course, part of the discussions here on Friday. I wrote it up, just put a link in there. But the thing is, Sam Han, who some of you have met, Silicon Valley, but now Seattle, I think, also one of these Doug want to change the world people like us. He's been pushing for quite a while about, I can't remember the exact name, but write a statement of how you want to collaborate. So that's why I did the one that's in the thread. It was based on this guy who sent me this email this morning. He was a bit annoyed. He has every reason to. So instead of just replying to him, I wrote us a statement and sent him the link, because we can't just, this is not Xerox PARC. This is not early Apple. We're not in the same place. We're not building on the same platform even. So to be really honest and clear about what we can and want to do is important. But what's really amazing, I had a discussion back and forth with Dave Crocker on Facebook today, and just to be in touch with such an early pioneer is a bit mind-bending. He was talking about anonymous FTP, how that was kind of a precursor to the web in an interesting way. The reason I'm mentioning him is how pathetically early is it right now? We can fantasize about walking into Xerox PARC in these days. But when we consider that we don't even have a home on the web, a persistent home, each one of us for some kind of an avatar, to have this thing of how we want to collaborate. The fact that that doesn't exist, I mean, this is like 101 sci-fi, right? To have a virtual representation of ourselves. These things don't exist, a lot of it. We have to do that. So, it's so easy to complain, and I'm chief number one complainer, God almighty. But also, what an incredible opportunity we have.
I have a thought on that, which is one of the things that, and again, one of the things I learned from looking at collaborative work is that humans, in a sense, don't collaborate that well because it's quite in our nature to be territorial. We don't mean to be, but it's just there deep within us. And so another take on how we talk about how we want to collaborate is to sort of turn it around and say, what are things that I know how to do? So what I want to be involved in and the bits that I contribute may be quite different, and they're both valid. But this kind of thing is somebody say, look, I'm really interested in this. I don't know how to do it, but if you sent me, several gigabytes of data, I can turn it around for you. I understand this, or I really understand the sort of visual aspect of this, or it. A lot of us have quite really interesting and non-overlapping skills. And one of the things about collaborating is getting people to just feel relaxed about ownership. So we say, look, I pass the ball to you. I mold it into a shape I think you understand. And now I can't do the next bit. So I pass it to somebody else. And that way, if we all contribute the things that we can do to this whole, I think there's a much greater chance of getting to an end. Whereas to a certain extent, it's just the nature of the world at the moment. We tend to, whether we want to or not, get stuck in a sort of silo of individual contribution, which means that we want to do something and we lack probably 75% of the skills that we need to achieve that. And we don't have anyone we can just ask, without having to have a big preamble to do that. So that's an aspect of collaboration I really love to see. It's something I see in the Tinderbox community, and I enjoy doing, is to sort of send me the thing you don't understand, the thing that I can do, and I'll send it back, and that's fun. And for me, it's a bit of a crossword puzzle, and it's gone away. But I don't own that data. I'm not invested in it. My responsibility as a collaborator is to not break something, or to knowingly do something that sort of makes it odd. Or if I do something I think has an impact, to tell the person I gave it to. And that sort of open-handed collaboration interface is something I think is perhaps something we can generate.
I think that's very close to what Gunter was talking about, because you used the term territorial. I would say specialist. We've evolved to be specialists within a this or that, and we don't have a Xerox PARC with beanbags. So it's harder to do, but we do need to figure out a way to do it anyway.
Yeah, the territoriality is more that's more a human trait. We have specialities, but the other thing is that something that I think we're all prone to and we don't perhaps realize is the sense of, this bit's mine. This toy is closer to me on the floor. I licked it and it's mine, and don't you touch it. Don't you dare.
I don't have a problem with that, though. I really don't. I think it's a good thing, because I think it's also a matter of responsibility. Like what I had to put up in my statement is that author is mine. It is my design. I was born an artist. I have a background in art. It is my work of art to the world. People judge author, they judge me. So it's really difficult for my ego, but at the same time, I take full responsibility. It's not someone else's issue of something wrong. However, the way that author interacts with someone else's stuff, that's when we really collaborate. If someone wants to come and help me do something on author, I'd love that. And I'd love to go and help someone else too. But I honestly do think ego is fine, as long as it is managed and clearly, explicitly understood where it fits. I mean, look at Doug, look at Steve Jobs. These are great things. And then you look at Tim Cook, who is not quite, he's all about the corporate structure for the thing to come out the other end. And it's the blandest crap you've ever seen. But
I just to sort of finish, the thing is, I guess it's just being. I think it's something I learned when I was sort of consulting is, it's not my train set. But at the same time, I had to educate most of my clients that if you won't tell me what keeps you up at night, I can't help you make a better train set. I'm not trying to help you because I want to run it. You've asked me because I understand things that you don't, and that's what I mean in terms of. And that's where the territoriality plays, because I think if we're honest with ourselves, in a way that we don't even sort of sense, we tend to take things in, and there's a sense of, right, it's mine now, and I'll do that. And that really works against collaboration, because the best stuff you can do is giving your expertise into something where you have no ownership, no investment. So, right, I can fix that. But I know that if you take this, you turned up the other way, you'll find it looks right. And that's really powerful, and it works really well. And when you see it operating well, it's good. And Gunter's quite right. If you're in the same room, that kind of thing tends to happen organically. But that's not the world we live in, not least because of COVID at the moment, and because of geographical separation. So I think we just have to work to overcome it.
So Raphael, how are you doing?
Oh, it's a little bit noisy here. I'll talk in a second.
Okay. Peter, how are you?
Very good. I think one thing we could do is branding. Maybe we just had some sort of little logo that we'd all share that we could slap on our projects, and then hot link the logo to a page talking about our little collective out here.
I have a name. The Future Text Initiative. It is an actual thing.
That sounds good. Do we have a logo for it?
I think we may actually. Hang on.
You might just want to Google FTI in case it turns out to be something embarrassing that Granny might not like.
Let me see here. Well, I mean, I used the FT logo, but
yeah,
I'm not saying we have to do it, but of course, I think it would be a good one. And it's on one of those news sites that has to be completely killed now.
Yeah. Well, there you go. If you want to piggyback something, yes, you call it the FT initiative. You don't have to tell people in the future of text rather than Financial Times. They'll get there eventually.
One thing that Vince said in dialogue on some of these things over the weekend was, what is that? The interplanetary file system or network.
Oh, IFPS.
That's it, yes. You know, we need to move to things when we can put something somewhere and expect to find it in the future. This DNS server-based thing is just so hokey. I mean, I'm lucky enough to have had a few conversations with Tim Berners-Lee, and I think he's an absolutely outsized genius. But I think also he understands that what he created was a successful hack. You know, how can we get beyond it? It's crazy.
Well, plus the sort of the fact that, you know, now when you're starting your sort of, you know, whizzy new business, it's all about, you know, can I find a domain name, or I can find a name that fits into a domain? And I'm thinking, how crazy is that? I mean, in the sense that if someone takes it away, well, you're slightly stuffed. And it'll still live there. It just won't have the whizzy name across the top, you know. But it sort of it does, I think, quite neatly exemplify just how messed up we've got ourselves.
And there are too many choke points. If Google decides that what you're doing is a threat to its core business model, suddenly no one will be able to find you in a search result anywhere on the planet, even if they go out 200 pages deep.
But one thing we've talked about a few times is email, using that as an infrastructure. Considering most people who do digital stuff have an email address, and considering that an email can contain all kinds of stuff, can we not have an email server do this? Even Gmail, can we not have, let's say author publishes a document via Gmail, right? Gets it to the right people, it has it distributed, you know, and we do updates. So the email client may not properly see it. That can be kind of hidden messages or whatever. Yeah. There's got to be something.
I actually had a hack for my old nonprofit that worked sort of like that. One of the neat features of Tinderbox was that it can go out and hit a server, including an email server. So I had my old Institute for End User Computing website have a registration form for people who wanted to get on our mailing list. And when that form was completed, it would send an email to an account that my copy of Tinderbox was watching. Tinderbox will then automatically suck that data in and add it to the mailing list I was maintaining inside of Tinderbox.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the neat things about Tinderbox too. It's really great for prototyping things that you're not necessarily going to keep in Tinderbox, but you can get a quick and dirty working implementation of an idea, and then you can go off and do it in JavaScript or Go or whatever language is most appropriate for the production side. But at least you can see it operationally running inside the Tinderbox environment with, you know, a relatively reasonable amount of work.
And it has sort of, you know, because it comes from a hypertextual background, it has the concept of sort of linkage built in, and also it works a way for those who aren't very technical. So you can work it as a sort of like a visual concept map, and it's just as happy. It's a real hybrid tool, niche Mac only, but yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
So email works on the principle of you have a client that when it's online, it goes to the server and says, hello, I have this, do you have anything new for me? And the server does things, right? So the email client can do a lot of the intelligent work. So why can't we just develop email clients for all our systems and then have that do the work whenever the client's computer is on? Act as a small database, do some sharing, and then whatever email service is just the go-between, like anonymous FTP, which isn't open for people, but email is. It can't be that hard.
I think you need to consider that a lot of these things I mean, a thing we tend to forget is a lot of these things were envisaged, and the sort of a lot of the design intent that you may not see surfaced is that this was around sending small amounts of visual text. And one of the things that rapidly broke when we moved to sort of newer stuff was the old thing of sort of quoting and nesting all disappeared because it got lost in a miasma of style text. And I can admit, I am the man who sat there the other night getting angry because I couldn't write footnotes in my email to somebody. But that's the one thing I bear in mind. So in other words, if you start from a premise that what you're doing is something that is probably going to be plain text, In other words, if it's got to have lots of style, and I don't mean linking to richer things, but if it doesn't work unless it's basically plain text, that should be just a design note to bear in mind.
But think about this. Think about Gunter building this incredible big thing, and then he presses a button and it is email to the people in his community. Just plain text email, not really intelligible to humans, but it describes the thing. And if we have the things to read it, our system will do that. It's not JSON. It's really, really crude, but it just allows us to piggyback on servers that people have.
Or RSS, which is the same thing another way around.
Is RSS alive, really?
It's there. Well, I think what happened to it was people couldn't make money off it. So what's really noticeable is, I still use NetNewsWire to read some of my feeds, and what has happened over the year is, whereas you could go read articles, now you get a list of articles that force you to go and read it on the website. So this is all about money. And I get that. I don't mean that. I don't say that unkindly, but so that's why RSS, I think, is not as popular as it was. I still think it's a much underused and overlooked thing. It's fairly simple. Dave Weiner wrote it to be very simple, and what most people think of it as is probably more complex than he envisaged. But it works. Same with OPML.
I'm looking at RSS.com.
Yeah.
They have all kinds of things.
Hold on a second. Oops. No. You want the RSS implementation is at the Berkeley. It's part of MIT. Can't remember the name. I'll give me a second, and I'll find the URL. So,
why did RSS end up dying anyways? It was so good.
I think it's that. I think it's money. I think it was just that it was hard to make money. It's hard to pay for the effort you put in to making the RSS. Now, on a personal level, it might not matter, but at the commercial level, obviously it did. If you were trying to build a magazine or a podcast or something, and I don't know, but having sort of sat through the wave of RSS and then it disappearing again, that the sense I had after was that it was just hard to make money using it.
I'm trying to create an account on RSS.com. There is free stuff, but I'm wondering when they start charging.
No, that's nothing to do with RSS per se. That's someone who's got the thing. Let me just find this RSS spec.
Well, I mean, RSS needs servers. That's one of the things. So that's what I mean. Like, if this is really easy for people to use and it lives in the proper open free RSS world, that's cool. All right, so
so RSS became a podcast website?
No, but RSS is what made podcasts, yes.
But RSS should be able to live on any server.
It should.
Just a file. So there's no reason that you need a special RSS server for it. It looks like that RSS.com is dealing with hosting big amounts of audio. So I can see where they might have some tweaked, customized infrastructure to make that a little bit cleaner.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just that most people don't have access to a server other than email. That's why I'm having.
I've put a URL on the sidebar, which I think it's changed from the one I remember, but that basically gets you to the RSS specification. And actually, Atom, if you come across that, was a slightly sort of people's front of Judea type splittage between two different aspects of where enhanced RSS should go. But the underlying thing, because Dave Weiner, who came up with the format, passed the spec over to it's something Berkman Institute. Anyway, Harvard basically, it's Harvard, not MIT, look after it in terms of sort of owning, in the loosest sense, the spec. So it's out there. It's a specification. It can be used. It has, sort of, formal spec docs, and it's actually very simple. So it is a thing. In essence, you could poke things through. And it's a syndication system. So, I mean, email, of course, was a generation earlier where you know, we weren't far from man running along with a message and a cleft stick. So, you know, you didn't know if there was someone at the other end of the network to pick up your email.
But we have to decide, guys, if we're going to do anything like this, the level of technical experience of the user. My users would be happy to download an app. They would not be happy to mess around on a server.
Sure.
So that's why if they have something like email or whatever, they should be able to enter their username and password. It's still boring to do. But what do you guys think? If we're going to remake a new kind of a web, what is the thing that is actually possible? Or should we just make it completely peer-to-peer where you can only get a file from me when my computer's online? Is that becoming more and more possible? Obviously, there are issues of dynamic IP addresses and all kinds of nonsense like that, but let's solve a huge problems right now. Just fix it. Fix the world.
Well, one thing that I like are some systems where you'll send them an email and then they'll send you an email back that's basically a template for what it wants to have for the next stage of the conversation. So that you could then fill out the blank spaces on the email, then you send that email back to the system. The system could go through it, extract your answers to its questions, and maybe send you another email with some more questions. So you could actually have an interactive dialogue through a couple cycles of emails bouncing back and forth. That's a possibility.
That sounds like a really cool way to are you a human for email.
Oh, I hate those "Are you a human?" Sometimes I'm afraid
It
one
sounds
day
like a clever way of doing it.
I always
Yes,
fail
sounds
at
like
these tests.
Sometimes I fear that I'm going to fail the test and they're going to inform me that I'm really not human.
That's actually my longest sci-fi thing, when someone finds out that they're not human. I was like, okay, anyway. But for instance, just to put you, Gunter and Raphael, on the spot. So one of you has a system, or you both have systems, something cool is done. You want the rest of us to be aware. Oh, we lost Gunter for a second. Raphael, like with me, if you want to share something from there, how do you envision that in a serverless world or in a not server specialist world? Sorry, Gunter, I was just repeating what you already know anyway. How can you or Raphael share with the rest of us without having to rely on a user having access to do stuff on a server?
Yeah, I don't know, because everything that we've been doing and thinking is based on having a platform. We haven't done a lot of research on more technical aspects of either serverless or, I mean, because it's not the same thing. We're using AWS serverless, but it's not what we're talking about right now. So I don't know. I mean, trying to think of ways of interacting with things, but sharing files always has been a burden. One thing that I used to use a long time ago, it was called Cloud App. Let me see if they're still around. But basically how it worked is that it kept running on the background on Mac. Yeah, they're still around. And then I could copy any file, and then it's a special copy shortcut. So I could copy anything in my computer. I could copy a text. I could copy a paragraph. I could copy a music file, a video, anything. And using this special copy command, it would automatically upload to Cloud App. And then it would put the link to the file on my clipboard. So all I had to do was copy a file and then paste the link to somebody, and it would automatically send that file to people. And it was the fastest way ever of sending things to other people. And it also gave me analytics. If the person opened the file, how long, how many people clicked that link, where it was open around the world, all sorts of analytics. It was amazing. I stopped using it because it became paid, and it was just like the free version has a limit to how many files I can do it, and that's useless. But it was like the best thing that I've ever used for sharing files extremely fast and efficiently. And it also kept all my files organized in their server as well, and I could search through it and do a lot of things. But it's still not the perfect way, but it was extremely fast, answering your question.
But there still was a server.
Yes.
But I think, Adam here, I'm trying to, I think servers could be fine here as a very temporary spot to put the files. So just as Raphael said, sending a link and putting it on a server for you or the software to download it for the next coming weeks or so is enough. I don't think we should complicate it more. We should see the web as a temporary medium. But the important thing is to never reference those places in our text, in the plain text, in the actual files. Do you get what I mean here? To have a very clean separation in the document space or docuverse, they should never see those links. So it's just a means of transportation. Just as I don't know what the name of the mailman is. So we could use the web. It's a simplest solution to bounce it on a web server. Repositories. Some can be more permanent, but just a link is perfectly fine for bouncing things.
I remember some years ago there was a place called Diaspora. They were competing against Facebook, and it was a system where it was completely open source and open, and every computer was its own node, and you were owner of all the information you had. You didn't upload it to anywhere. You just made it available so people could see, but it was always on your end. And I like all of those ideas, but usually they're a lot more complex to use for regular people. Like I would never see, for example, my parents using it, or even somebody younger using it. I think there's a lot of technical aspects to a lot of incredible ideas that we throw around, but to have them easily accessible and used for the common person, I find that that's the challenge right there. A lot of the technical aspects have to become invisible for it to become used by regular folk. If it's something that it's just specific for people like us, then we're never going to have a different kind of standard or new way of putting things on the web or sharing, or a new web. It's extremely challenging and difficult, and that's not even getting into the point of we need to partner with people that define standards, and unfortunately it's only 4 or 5 companies nowadays, right? If it's not coming from one of them, the possibilities of it surviving are extremely low, in my opinion.
I think, Adam, your point about not knowing the name of your mailman is kind of funny, because my wife and I were just discussing, we don't know the name of our mailman today. That actually happened. But having a neutral communication standard, sending a package from A to B is an important part of this, right? And I don't think anyone here minds using a server, provided it's available for a general user and provided it's not relied upon for the next 20 years.
If I understand Adam's point correctly, and I probably am misunderstanding it, it's a sense that rather than in a sense put my envelope in the post box with the address on it, with the full address, I just say what it is, and the system knows where to send it. So in other words, I'm not embedding the full address in the text. Was that what you were alluding to, Adam?
You need some sort of address, a name at least, that it's
Yeah,
going
yeah,
to
sure, sure.
a specific person, or it's a publication that I've published this. But we don't specify the exact way the post takes to the. We only know the end address, and I think we should copy that. Have that as an approach, because in the long term, all the systems and all the even the addresses will change. So we can only hope for preserving the actual documents, not the transport ways.
Well, the mailing list part of that, like Peter was also talking about earlier, seems to make a lot of sense. Of course, we have to look out for spam and all that kind of stuff. But you know, if I publish a document or documents or whatever, I should really allow my computer to be the one that serves it to the world if someone wants it in the future. It should be quite optional for anyone else to publish it. But at least mine should do it, right? But if you have a mailing list as being the initial distribution of the PDF or thing or whatever, but it really knows where it came from. I don't know. That's not easy, because dynamic IP address is not like CRIP.
Just one other thought and a thought passing through my mind as Raphael was speaking is that I think it's absolutely right. And when we talk about sort of people not here, I mean, a good part of our community in the future of text are those people as well, because their interaction with text is not at first touch through technology, it's through other means, or the understanding, there may be calligraphers, there may be typographers or something. So it is quite important for our little community here that we bear that in mind.
Here in Brazil, people are running like full businesses using only WhatsApp. It's ridiculous. I'm serious.
That's actually interesting.
Oh, I just posted a link to a 1997 paper that you might find interesting. It was a user interface called Pick and Drop. And it was designed to let you move data from one computer to another, but you wouldn't be actually moving the data. You'd be moving a little pen-like marker that contained an ID of a network clipboard out there somewhere in the ether, so that when you brought your marker physically to the new system where you wanted to drop the data, all the new system would do would be to pick up the ID of the marker that you were carrying around, and then it would go and contact the network, figure out what data you'd last dropped on that particular marker ID, fetch it and send it, to hide all of those mechanics behind the scenes.
Sorry, that's really cool, but Peter, it makes me think of the earlier discussion in a different way. So picture this: when you publish to your own hard drive, special volume, and you publish to a list server. And the attachment is stored there properly in a normal folder. Anyone who subscribes to this will also download all those documents. If we then have a mechanism whereby the server and the originator will know where there are full versions, at least initially, things can break, fair enough. That means that I can publish, and Mark is, because he subscribed to it, builds a full collection. At some point, my server dies, but Mark and others have these full collections, and they should then be able to somehow re-announce themselves.
This is the BitTorrent approach.
It's a BitTorrent approach, but I'm thinking of making it more primitive.
Sure.
But literally, it is a folder with PDFs, right? So anybody can just move it around on a thumb drive, so to speak, or FTP. It just doesn't matter. It shouldn't be technical. It is because I keep saying, like a document, this is a thing, that's a thing, that's a thing. You have it, I have it. Yeah, I know, we just happen to have it on the desk at the same time, but it is so much more robust. The having things spread out. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, to get the best benefits from digital interactive network computing, there's a lot of digital interactive network computing we have to ignore.
And it would be really nice if we had human memorable identifiers for documents. Now, imagine something more like let's see, thinking for a second, like humane computing passwords where it'd be a phrase instead of having it be, right now it's how few characters can we use, and we use the entire character set, excluding symbols that are so close visually in most fonts that you can't tell them apart. And okay, you've got a compact identifier, but it's not something that you're ever going to be able to memorize. Instead, what if it was something like, the purple grouse visited Boston, and that could be your identifier. So it would actually be a memorable phrase or expression, and you use that instead.
Are you thinking about the geographic thing of 3 words for the location?
I was just about to say that.
What 3 files?
That's actually really, really interesting. That's interesting. And also, yeah, interesting. Huh.
Yeah.
Because it was
I like that.
Jeff Raskin's idea for the humane password system. So using a phrase like that, you have a much bigger, yeah, it's true, it's more characters, but it's something I'm going to be able to memorize so that if I had to, I could just take it in my head from one place to another.
I'm just looking at Raphael's directions. Finally, we get to know where he is.
Oh, that's actually not my directions here. I'll put my directions right now.
Mine, unfortunately, is something like sort of, it is literally something like grumpy old man or something, So
Yeah.
miraculously, out of all the 3 words it could have produced.
Oh, look, the 3 words that I got is written, cans, librarian.
Really? Okay, I'm gonna have to get my afterwards. That's super, super wild.
Well, before I forget, Raphael, lines of thought, which I'm much enjoying. This I came across, which is actually quite recent, and it was by sheer chance. I was trying to find a reference on the origin of page numbering, and which led me to this, which looks interesting, and it's now arrived and is quite interesting. So it's somebody writing about, reading post digital. In other words, the transition thing. Anyway, I just mentioned because I thought a few people here might find it interesting.
How's my audio now? I upgraded my microphone. Is it better than before?
It's good.
Good.
Okay, just pop in a link to Amazon's listing for Jeff's book where he talked about the password system using phrases.
Okay. Oh, cool.
I'm so excited to find out my 3 meter thing here. Okay, this should be exactly where I'm sitting now.
The nice thing is that you can choose between the squares around it to find better words.
Onions.
Your curated location.
Onions Unity Palm. No, thank you. This is so much fun.
Yeah, I remember. It sounds like a real issue. I love it because it's easy to share and it's extremely precise. I remember when this came out, like you could send addresses to, places in the middle of nowhere and it would be addressable, and that's incredible.
Oh, I love this. I just put in 3 words. I've come up with supply online delay. This has to be a metaphor for something.
I've got loads of drafts ready, so there.
Yeah.
This is really very interesting. It makes it quiet paper. Oh my God, that's even better. It's a way for people to give up their privacy because it's so much fun.
So what's the new thing for your conference name tally?
This is so much fun. Quiet paper leaves.
Yeah.
So I think written cans librarian, quiet paper leaves are doing something interesting here. Very cool.
So they have versions of this in Cyrillic and Chinese and things. Because it's no, if I'm a Russian person, lost in the middle of the tundra, it's no use giving me an alphabet I don't understand.
Well, it's copy and paste, but yeah, good point actually. Good.
It's a very nice idea, though.
Yeah, it's a good thing. So we still haven't figured out how to save the world through having documents do persistence, have we?
So a question about that. We're talking about sending things between people, right? like, is it just individual files, any kind of file, and what happens after? Is it just like a postman? You send it and that's it, it's done?
What I think is we're dealing with two different types of sending. One is a collaboration sending, and that can be live JSON or whatever, who cares? It's live, it's happening now, two people or more collaborating. But then as an artist, I remember very much my art teacher when I was very young, was I had a thing and then I added a thing and a thing, and she said, at a certain point, you got to stop, you got to frame it, it's done. So the act of publishing, also in academia, you know, they work on it forever, like Mark's been working on this hypertext paper. There comes a point where it is done and it's published. Whether it's by publishing and given to the publisher in the world, doesn't matter. But you're saying it is framed and done. That's the one I'm really focused on. And of course, it is really, really important that that can be richly engaged with, both through citations and annotations and all of that stuff. But it is a thing in the world that should be immutable, and it should not be more easy to destroy than if you have to burn every copy of a physical printed journal.
One problem about the replication thing, though, of course, you know, let's think of a document like a PDF. Of course, if I annotate and I place the annotations within the PDF, I've now changed the effectively if I have a hash of the key. So there is an issue about
that becomes
sorry?
That becomes a new document with a new hash.
Okay, the problem is that if we're all going to annotate, so if all of us annotated our PDF of future text, then the canonical copy is the unannotated one, but there is a practical issue in that, and maybe that's something that needs to be thought through. You almost need a method of a hash that indicates that it's a derivative of a known hash rather than just being a fresh hash. Just fresh from the trenches, an interesting thing for us doing future of text and this thing about, I just had to do a deadline on Friday and send a document, which we were told had to be, you know, we were told it could be this long, you know, this many pages of references. But there's confusion in that it's being marked in a single column layout and it's going to be published in a 2-column layout. So most people will have been shimming like mad to get their content into a single page layout, but then somebody else is going to completely ruin. You know, and this is only 2 days ago, and this is the insanity we're in. And in the digital age, we really should be moving beyond that. And in fact, I would say we should be thinking digital first. So if we have to worry about how we get onto a piece of paper, well, that's a sort of that's an expensive side problem that, you know, will have to fund itself. But really, what we want are things that are clean, readable, so that the text stream is not polluted with page headings or copyright notices. Well, you know, sort of visual branding and that kind of thing. And I don't think we're there yet, and that's something that I think this community definitely could consider, because it's a needed thing going forward.
Yes, but absolutely, Mark, strongly agree that cosmetics is a joke. But in terms of these different questions, the first thing we need to do is find a way to publish a thing and have it out there that people can interact with. That has to be the first thing. All the layers of interaction, annotations are really difficult and important, but if we can't publish digitally more powerfully than we can on paper, that's completely messed up.
Well, I'd agree.
You know, like the whole thing, if you are part of the Apple ecosystem, you don't own anything, you are renting.
I read your text here on your point of view on where you're coming from, and in the beginning of our development, I was considering developing using, you know, Swift and within the Apple ecosystem as well. But I think even you so mentioned, like, development is expensive, and it's hard to find developers. They're extremely expensive, and they jump around between projects. Like, I've had very bad experiences with developers, like third-party developers. Like getting a developer in, do some work, and then usually they jump off the boat on the first offer that pays them more, because they're so high demand that it's hard to get. So developing things is pretty complicated, and that's why we ended up choosing to go, web native, because there's more people with that knowledge than there is people with knowledge on iOS. Apple is extremely expensive in Brazil. I've used Apple for a long time, but the reality, at least here, is that it's very, very hard to find people with that skill set and that even have their products. It's like Android is a lot more popular than iPhones, and people rarely have iPads or Macs. So it's pretty complicated in that section. But I completely agree that the Apple ecosystem is incredible. Developing for it is nice because you have a lot of standards already defined that took years and years and years to implement. But the thing that gets me is that it is a walled garden. It's an incredible garden. Things work beautifully within their ecosystem, but it's not for everyone. And that's what ends up getting me.
Oh yeah, I agree with you. I mean, look, I fell in love with the Mac. I did not fall in love with computers, right? So that's my history. That's my orientation. But if Microsoft now says, here's X amount of money, port over to Windows, I wouldn't hesitate. The world has changed today, so I'm kind of stuck. The reason I don't like the web is purely link rot. The thing we've been talking about. It really horrifies me. Really, really scares me. The fact that Brewster Kahle and other people have the Internet Archive, and that is supposed to be the repository of knowledge from humanity, it's freaking insane, right? That's why
it is.
The fact that I develop on a Mac, fine for Mac users. There's no reason I shouldn't be able to share stuff with anyone else. That's why PDF, for all its ills, at least for now, is a thing I can give to anyone that can be read anywhere. And we're developing other things. So I've been talking about documents for at least 20 years, the importance of documents, partly because they also a verb, they document, right? That's why I really think we need a really robust way to exchange things, files, documents, not just have it all floaty.
One thing to bear in mind is that you don't necessarily have to have web technologies on the web. There is the Electron platform, which lets you build apps that can run on each of the major operating systems, essentially by taking a web browser and a Node backend server, combining them in a single binary that would run on each platform. And then you can use all of your web native libraries and affordances that are provided by the entire NPM ecosystem in an application that'll be a native application. And the most successful example of this is Visual Studio Code, which is actually gaining share and it's starting to push out all of the native editors, even on the Mac. Because for instance, we had Sublime Text that was a major dominant force among programmers, editors on the Mac. But we've gotten to the point where the VS Code shell, since it can take plugins that are created by any developer of boutique custom languages, has gained so much mind share now that those native, arguably superior in the user interface because they were completely Mac native from the start, customized programmers, editors can't hold a candle to it because, say I'm creating a new language, the odds of my being able to get the developers at Sublime or BBEdit to implement support for my language are very small. Instead, with VS Code, I can build the plugin myself. There's a language server protocol that allows any new programming language coming along to publish IntelliSense, look up information, to provide documentation for that language. So the key is that they've got the cross-platform modular ecosystem that people can add on to, and that's really starting to dominate.
I think that's all very nice. And I see what Raphael is typing here, but the point is, Mark and I, we are doing hypertext stuff. And a shocking thing is not only you can't do the whole link back and citation flow because there wasn't knowledge for that, but the early text in, okay, Raphael, I'll talk to you later. Oh, he's half here, good. It is the actual, I think a document is holy, not just the whole thing, but it is holy. To be able to find the thing and not have to worry about where it was created and all of that stuff, we got to focus on that. you know, end user coming into field, finding a thing to read can't be that hard. And all we have now is the Googles for it.
But I think, well, exactly, that you know, the, the paucity of what you get from search, where you either get everything or nothing. But I'm one of the perhaps one of the moves to the digital generation is a slight shift in the way of our writing. Is to make more explicit our linkage, because when we were writing for another mind to read, you would expect the mind the other end to unpack that. Now we're giving some algorithm trained on God knows what, and an imperfect understanding of even English, let alone you know, the many other languages that have a smaller corpus to work off, and expecting it to understand. And what we don't do is we don't hint. So in other words, maybe, and this is just a thought, we need, not in all writing, but certainly in some of our sort of business or organizational or academic writing, to be essentially seeding in what amounts to metadata into the way we express ourselves, so that we can then allow the machines to get their hands on it and go find stuff. Because if their approach has to be a brute force attack on our somewhat casual use of linguistic structure, I'm not sure we're going to move forward very fast. Apart from being able to order, you know, 10 beds or 5 pizzas or whatever.
Yeah, sorry, Adam, you also...
I think one way to look at the web nowadays is as an app platform, but not a document platform. It has, it has shifted from it. In the beginning, it was HTML that you could do yourself, but the more the time has gone, the more it has become a JavaScript and JSON and app and a quite good application platform. I was very skeptical towards that for a long time, but now you can do wonders, like all the Google Earth, and you can do very rich things and very fast things, and even faster things than you can do native in many places if you're good. So you can. So I think you should view the web as an app platform and do documents inside it, very carefully crafted documents inside it, and not think of it as HTML and servers and domains. You could still have it as a way to reach your folders that stay there, your collections.
I think that's fine and good and makes a lot of sense, but I think the key issue we have to figure out is, we publish this thing, in 50 years, someone must be able to find that thing. That really has to be the key thing. And then we assume that all DNS has changed. All basic server companies have either upgraded or died enough. So we have to have a robust way. Maybe it's because I'm about to turn 53 in 2 weeks. I'm feeling like an old man, but you know, this thing of just being able to do this and amazing interactions is great. You know, NLS had the journal. It wasn't just flying through hyperspace. We published a journal. Of course it was a server, but that was a different kind of server at the time. It was, anyway, we all have to go. I have to go as well. I saw Raphael's message, but let's work on all these different aspects. All right, if there's a PDF, I don't want it to die. And you know, PDF can smuggle a lot of stuff inside it. And also PDFs are tiny. If it doesn't have images, they're absolutely tiny. That's one thing that Adobe got right. They are really small. So yeah.
We have a link.
Oh, we have to learn to write in PostScript.
Do we have a link to the PDF specification somewhere? I really should dig into that.
It's findable, but it's a mess, which is why Adobe had to develop this liquid view, which uses AI to parse even a modern one just to get stuff. It's a complete horrible mess. But if we treat it as a printed thing, it has something.
It always was a container from the get-go. Because a lot of things were actually literally just scanned pictures. because one of the things one of the things they were trying to do with Adobe was, because I mean, one of the biggest uptakes, if I recall, was the American court system, went from paper to PDF as a big cost saving. So, and so you can sort of see some things that got addressed early were driven by those sorts of corporate clients.
Indeed. On that note, we'll save more of the world on this coming Friday, right?
Okay, have a good week, everybody.
Take care, everybody. Bye.
Stay safe.
Have a nice
Thank you.
week. Bye-bye.
Bye.